Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Artificial DM. Today we're going to be diving into another RPG horror story, both of them about vindictive DMs. Let's go ahead and get into the first story, The Ballad of Malty Edge, by Edgy Preschooler. This story takes place in D&D 5e homebrew setting. The world is fresh off a massive god war, and the goddess of the divine has vanquished the evil wizards, so now all non-divine magic is unavailable. DM insisted we use the classes he made. They're terrible, but I'll probably expand on it in another post, so we don't get to pick from the usual D&D stuff. Here is the cast. Mr. Silent, the warrior, a wanted criminal who pretends to be a noble knight. While this premise is intriguing, it never amounted to anything. Didn't contribute to the disaster, but didn't prevent it either. Moron, the falconer of the northern lands, the main cause of the suffering, came to the lands to tame a powerful bird. Horny, tiefling rogue, joined later, but did not help in any way. Malty Edge, my character, a wood elf rogue and the unfortunate victim of this campaign. A womanizer and a cheat, he, at the same time, bears no malice, and just wants to get rich quick to spend his life surrounded by luxury and beauty. DM, the DM, obviously, while new at the time, was just terrible, and you shall see why. The story. Our characters met in a tavern, as most adventurers do, and we quickly decided to take on some quests. The first of them were nothing special, but later on, we were tasked with hunting down a demon. This demon turned out to be a succubus, and while she did murder several townsfolk, she did so to protect herself and didn't actually assault anyone. The situation was like this. The main party, consisting of Moron and Silent, were conversing with the succubus, while Malty Edge was supposed to sneak up behind her and ambush her. Hearing her story, Malty decided that, instead of attacking instantly, he would approach from behind and use his charm, and also suggestion that he's got her cornered to convince her to leave. But Moron thought he knew better, so he gave away Malty's position, just as he was about to approach the succubus, ruining his chance to charm the demonic lady. The succubus ended up leaving without a fight, while I, in character and out of character, was pretty pissed off at Moron. This, however, is just the beginning. Later on, our party reached the capital, where they were joined by Horny. I was pretty miffed about having another rogue in the party, as I felt it would be us two fighting for the thunder of the sneaky character. However, it went from bad to worse, as the local thieves guild gave us a difficult task to kidnap a prophesied child of the church, who had just arrived into the city. The plan was made. Malty would go inside the church as a visitor and attempt to use his charm to convince the young girl to run away with them willingly, while Horny would sneak inside the cathedral the girl of prophecy resided in and scout the place out. He, however, failed miserably, as he accidentally murdered a monk and a nun, and then barely escaped with his life. I should mention that the church in this world is one of the most powerful organizations ever. So, as you can guess, they quickly turned that cathedral into a fortress. The Thieves Guild boss was not happy that not only the party failed their first mission, they made everything difficult for all crime doers in the city. However now, I should point out that DM is a big fan of collective punishment, so the blame was pinned on the entire party, not just the one who fudged it all up. Frustrated and angry, Malty opted for a good old kidnapping, so the plan was set and executed, and the prophesied child was successfully kidnapped. The only one to suffer was Malty, who got shot in the leg. However, things went from good to worse, as the church's special forces attacked the guild. But the succubus from before came to our aid, and teleported us all away, along with the kidnapped girl. To explain, after the entire debacle, Malty did actually manage to meet the succubus and explain he wasn't going to hurt her, just woo. We ended up quite far away from the capital, and thus, safe. At least, I thought we were. During his hunt, Moron encountered the bird he sought to tame, a massive raven, that was actually an eldritch abomination named the Spectre. However, the player either didn't understand or completely forgot, and thought that this bird was just a very powerful thunderbird, instead of the apocalyptic beast. So he bargained with it and managed to strike a deal. That involved all the player characters. Did I mention DM loves collective punishment? Imagine Malty's shock when he had a cursed brand appear on his neck, and then got told that he, along with his compatriots, need to seek out several artifacts of power, or his soul will be consumed and tormented for eternity. Angry shouts were emitted, attacks were made, but the Spectre made it clear that if we kill Moron, we're all as good as dead. So, with no other option, the adventure continued. Several sessions later, nothing of much interest to the story being told happened. We arrived in the capital of another country. After a few brief quests, Malty decided to chill in the tavern and drink his problems away, while Moron and Horny took up a quest from the local Thieves Guild to go to a royal dance and meet up some of the contacts there. They did end up going, but once there, instead of conversing with people and making contacts, they decide to steal the king's crown. DM was a railroading jackass who made every character important to the story god-level indestructible, yet they still decided to do it. Of course, they were apprehended, but did I mention that DM loves collective punishment? The royal guards, instantly knowing everyone ever involved with these two, and apprehend Malty as he's getting drunk in the tavern. Oh DM, so clever are your ways. Not. This was the breaking point both for me and for my character, as he, in cackling madness, attacks the royal guard, committing, essentially, suicide by cop. Thus ends the Ballad of Malty Edge. All he wanted was a luxurious and sinful life. What he got was pain, suffering, and madness. TLDR, my character, originally a well-meaning rogue, is driven to madness and suicide by his companions, who commit stupid mistake after stupid mistake, and the DM who railroads the hell out of the party, makes his NPCs gods and punishes the entire party for the mistakes of the few of its members. And this is why collective punishment is illegal to the Geneva Convention. Seriously though, the DM is railroady and wasn't being fair to the players. Sure, some of the players made bad choices, but that happens in any D&D game. Sometimes it's even fun to make bad choices, just to see what you can get away with. The DM is at fault for this one. This story is from Snow Kafka. DM became obsessed with Twitch streaming after watching Critical Role. Here are some examples of the insanity he put us through in order to make it big. My wife and I recently quit a long-running game that was, quite honestly, the worst experience I've ever had with D&D. To make a long story short, a very close friend of mine approached me several months ago to start a campaign, and after a lot of unnecessary frustration, which probably deserves a separate story of its own at some point, we came to the first session, excited to start. After months of being open with the DM, we'll call him Mark, giving him many chances, and being too afraid of hurting our friendship with him to leave, we left just as excitedly as we had come in. There were many, many great horror stories over the course of time with that group, but here are the highlights. I'll start with the moment things first started to go downhill. The first couple of sessions weren't so bad, and it was pretty routine stuff. The party met in a tavern. We were asked to train villagers to repel a bandit threat, that sort of thing. The third or fourth session, though, we showed up to find that Mark and his wife, Lydia, had spent a ton of money littering their living room with cameras, projectors, and D&D memorabilia practically overnight. "I've been watching this cool show called Critical Role," Mark said, "and I've decided we're going to be Twitch streamers. Also, we're going to switch from 3.5 to 5e, starting now." My wife and I realized that he had asked Lydia and Kevin for their opinion on this, but not ours. We had no idea this was coming, but we saw how much money Mark and Lydia dropped on it, so we felt obligated to give it a try. What followed was incredibly awkward. We weren't expecting to be asked to perform in front of a camera, so my wife and I were uncharacteristically quiet. I was the only member of the group with any acting experience at all, and even I only took one class in college, so the stuttering and cliché dialogue that was never a noticeable problem before was magnified 100 times when the party was being filmed. Mark's utter lack of familiarity with the new edition was also evident. When your DM has to stop and look up a rule, that 5-minute pause doesn't seem like much, but it seems like an eternity when you know people are waiting for you to hurry up. To say it was a train wreck is a major understatement. To make it worse, soon after our first session, Mark texted everyone in the group and gave us personalized critiques on our performance. He picked apart everything each of us did before giving us homework, which was to watch Critical Role and learn how to do it the right way. Not long after the performance reviews, we were in a session where our characters were in an Arctic village that was under attack. My wife, a Beastmaster Ranger, ran to a nearby tent where her pet was resting, but the DM described that the tent was encased with ice and she couldn't enter it. She wondered out loud if there was a way to get through, and Mark very quickly said, no, it's ice. You can't just walk through ice." Another player, Kevin, laughed and called my wife stupid. The next week, Mark described that our party was in a cave, and something happened to my wife's character to make her go temporarily blind. She asked if she could hear something, and Mark said, in a huff, "Obviously not. You're blind." My wife and I gave each other a look, but the other 2 members of the party didn't seem bothered. I said, "I think you misunderstood. She asked if she could hear something, not see it." But Kevin laughed and called me an idiot, and Mark said, "Yeah, you guys obviously don't know what blind means." I want to clarify right here that all of us are in the 28 to 32 range. We should understand how eyes and ears work. Mark loved to treat rolls of 1 as critical failures, and made his own failure chart where every result ended in the character being seriously injured. After he introduced this, I pulled him aside and asked if he thought that was a good idea, seeing as how we had fighter types in the party who were attacking twice in a round of combat, and statistically would roll more 1s. He said it was fine, and if the fighters had a problem with it, they should have rolled different classes. By the time my wife and I left, her character had 3 major facial scars that the DM ruled gave her a -6 to persuasion checks altogether, was blinded in both eyes, and lost her left leg, all because she fumbled in combat. Once, the DM had to pause to look something up, and told us to talk casually amongst ourselves. We said a few words, and then got quiet. We had paused for just a few seconds before Mark looked up from the table and loudly yelled, "I said talk! We're going to lose followers because you guys are just sitting around!" One session, my wife asked, "Can my character break away from the crowd for a second and see if a certain NPC is here?" Mark's response was, "I don't know. Can you? You know, guys, in Critical Role, the players don't ask for permission to do something. They just do it. It's more professional. The fact that you aren't doing that clearly shows that you aren't doing the homework I'm giving you." He then dismissed her question and pretended she never asked anything in the first place. The shit monster incident. Good lord. I was playing a rogue and wanted to multiclass to warlock. I asked Mark to make sure he was okay with it, and he agreed, as long as I presented him with an idea for my patron before I went ahead and leveled up. Mark loved the concept I wrote up, but told me I could only multiclass if I agreed to have a trade-off for my new abilities. I was wary, but I assumed he meant something minor, like potentially having far-off consequences of me siphoning this being's power, or something. Instead, he insisted that my character instantly had to become insane, because he was hearing voices from a being from space. He drew up another chart, which was supposed to simulate my character's insanity, and it was basically as unfair as his fumble chart. I had to roll, every day, to see if my character randomly lost one of his senses, couldn't speak for the day, and similar things. I could only get away with not sucking for the day by rolling a 20. I refused, and told him it felt like he was punishing me for multiclassing. Other party members had done it without any repercussions, so it seemed weird that I had to suffer drawbacks for using a mechanic outlined in the book. He argued that my level 1 warlock abilities would make my character way more powerful than the rest of the party, and I needed some kind of restraint so I didn't outperform everyone. I refused and told him to forget it. I showed up next session with a new level in Rogue. Mark started the cameras and told the party that I was now a warlock, and as a result, my character was now blind. He then narrated how I was arrested out of nowhere by guards, taken to an underground prison, and I had to sit for our entire 6-hour session without getting any screen time or getting to participate at all, while my party had to rescue me. At the end of that session, the DM had a randomly passing fairy attack me, and cast a spell on a nearby outhouse to create a sentient shit monster that one hit KO'd me. No attempts to save, just instantly knocked unconscious. He pulled me aside afterward and admitted that he purposely invented this particular fairy and made it resistant to all of my abilities, and made the DC to resist it impossibly high. He did this, he said, because I needed to understand that he was the DM. I was the player, and I needed to respect his rules. This guy completely upturned his group, said, "We're moving from this edition to this edition with no feedback. We're recording our games, live streaming it, haha." And then he's giving them critique as if they're trying to learn how to be better players. No, they are just there to play D&D. The smug expression I can imagine on Mark makes me want to smack him. He literally entrapped the players into his homebrew railroad and gets pissy about it whenever they don't want to do what he wants, enough so that he'll take a player and throw them in jail? That sucks. After the first few of these stories, I decided to invite Mark out for a beer so I could talk to him in person. I told him, as gently yet firmly as I could, that while I had no issue with his desire to start streaming, I thought he was taking it way too seriously, and was jeopardizing the fun of the game for everyone else. I also told him that if things didn't change, and pretty quickly, my wife and I would probably leave. He said he understood my frustrations, and then immediately blamed Kevin for everything, because it was his idea to stream in the first place. Okay, whatever. After the idiocy kept continuing, my wife and I met with him and his wife over coffee and told them very bluntly that we were not okay with what was going on and we needed to quit. Again, Mark blamed Kevin. He told us everything was cool and he had no bad feelings about it. That was 3 months ago. Since then, Mark usually refuses to do anything with us, and when he does, he won't talk about anything but his campaign and how successful his channel is. He sends me unsolicited texts about how I can be a better DM in my current campaign, even though he's never sat in on it. He offers to DM my campaign for me so I can learn how to do it right. His most recent trick has been to text me to let me know that they're having an amazing time without me, and I should feel bad for letting his group down. Even though we've been friends for 18 years, our relationship has dissolved into me receiving passive-aggressive texts a few times a week. And that, folks, is the tale of how a DM's Critical Role obsession ruined an entire campaign for me. It seems this DM is a huge fan of Critical Role, but hasn't really applied anything that Critical Role teaches. They do ask, "Hey, can I do this?" They have respect for each other. They're not targeting each other and going, "Hey, you didn't do what I want you to do, so you're banished for the session, and then at the end of it, we're gonna kill you." I'm glad that OP and his wife ended up leaving, but it really sounds as if they should have left sessions ago. And don't get me wrong, streaming with your friends or recording your games with your friends is really fun. Please have permission before going ahead and deciding, "Hey, we're gonna record this." Because it's incredibly rude to make someone be on camera when they don't want to be. I want to know, what would you do if your games were suddenly being streamed online without your consent? Please let me know down in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts. that's going to do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.